So I'm really excited to hear your presentation today. Over to you, Jonathan, Sales Director. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Justine, for inviting us. Much appreciated. So yeah, I'm Jonathan Powell. I'm the Director at Spectra Packaging. As Justine's already mentioned, we're a UK-based plastics manufacturer operating out of Halesworth in Suffolk. We have about 104,000 square feet on a 17.5-acre site. And we employ just over 180 staff at present. And we're here to talk about circular economy. So, and what Spectra thinks that it means and what that means for us within a business. So, since we opened in 2008, we've been huge proponents of the incorporation of recycled materials into our packaging. And I'll be honest, back then that was a losing battle. Going out to brands and trying to convince them to use recycled material when they perceive it to be of a lower quality and a lower grade. And the consumer base was also less engaged and less aware. That was a real uphill battle, but it was something that we were really passionate about, and we've already heard a little bit about the make waste model, which we're here, and Justine's kind of gone through this for us about taking these natural resources, extracting them, manufacturing, consuming those, and then just discarding them without thought for the repercussions, and that's that very linear model. What do we think should happen? So we agree that this should be the methodology, this reduce, reuse, recycle process where we say we manufacture products, these are retailed, these are consumed, they're collected, responsibly recycled, and they're repurposed back into new products. Okay, this is then helping to value our natural resources, and then through this kind of model we can really move to a much more sustainable society. So, the idea being that we place a greater value on our natural resources, and doing that will allow us to develop new opportunities, new technologies, and we've seen this come through already with the huge increase in infrastructure and recycling, with new advances in bioplastics and modern technologies that way, and this will help us safeguard the planet for future generations. So, to do this, our thought is we need to make sure that we're using the resources that we have correctly. That means sparingly and appropriately and respectfully. Okay, and to do that, we need to have greater accountability. And that comes from business leaders like ourselves, through to government as well. So, as a business, what do we think? Well, we need to take responsibility for what we make. We need to make sure that we are working hard to provide the best and most environmentally friendly solutions that we can, that the industry can support with at the time, and that we need to give consumers sensible choices. Moving on to government, I think Joe mentioned quite clearly earlier that that's a very hard task to fight, and we agree wholeheartedly. But there are certain things that we think that really need to happen. So first of all, a unified waste management structure. You know, I think we're all probably experienced the fact that there are so many different things that we can put in our recycling bins depending on where we live. And this is a massive, massive problem, and it causes this consumer confusion. Now, I live in Norfolk, I work in Suffolk, and the difference between what can go in recycling where I live versus our factories is completely different, and that is a significant challenge. And we need to see some of that change. Plastics packaging tax, that was introduced by the government last year, April 2022, that saw a levy of £200 per tonne placed on manufacturers like ourselves for any packaging that we manufacture that contained less than 30% recycler. That is a great initiative. We think that's fantastic. What we would say is it's slightly cynically executed. So what it's done is it's not punitive enough. The cost of it is still actually cheaper than putting in recycled material into your products. That seems to me to be counterintuitive, so it is just then generally becoming a tax. And on top of which, those revenues aren't ring-fenced, so they are not being reused. It's not going back into infrastructure to improve waste management, it's not going back into improve recycling. So, great idea, but we feel a little bit cynically executed. And then I think this was touched on earlier, deposit return schemes. What a fantastic idea. As a child of born in the 70s and growing up in the 80s, I remember this for glass. Some of you look like you might not. But I remember this very much, you know, being sent back with some glass bottles to the corner shop by my parents to go and get the 10s and 20 pences and bring them back home. What a fantastic way of applying value to our purchases. And we really think this is something that needs to be moved into plastics. We know that the Scottish Government have literally just announced that they're rolling theirs back from August now to March. We've seen that the Welsh Government have made some strides towards that, but we're still waiting for sort of solid confirmation on what centralised UK Government are going to be doing about it. But by doing this, we can highlight the value of our waste to consumers. And I think really, when we're talking about trying to have an impact, and a lot of people said this morning about the opportunity to have a real impact, what can we do? Well, actually, by putting that on the onus on the consumer, by hitting their pockets and placing a real value to them, what you can do is you can then drive that value into them and make sure that they're going to get those recycled. In fact, if we look at Germany, they have a 98% recycling rate for plastics, purely through the introduction of a DRS scheme. This is an idea that we had internally in-house, consumer labelling. We're all aware of this kind of thing, where we look at how we eat. Great way of looking at our products, and we're seeing now in restaurants the calorie counts and the impact of the food that we're eating. Why can't we have this for packaging? Let's be able to make informed choices. I think one of the biggest problems out there is confusion. The consumer doesn't know what they're doing, what to do for the best. How do we make a real good impact? How do we make sustainable choices? I'll talk a little bit about life cycle analysis later on, but this is a massive, massive issue, so we can actually communicate it clearly. Things like this, it's a start. Highlighting that you can recycle it, it's a great start, but something that actually tells us about the environmental impact of the packaging that we're using would be a really good step forwards. So, we're saying that companies must step forward, industry must step forward. Now, it's great to put it on the consumer, but the consumer doesn't know what they can do until businesses go out there and put it forwards for them. And that's where we have to be thought leaders and a proper force for change. So what does that mean for Spectra as a company? Well, we adopt this reduce, reuse, recycle process that we talked about a little while ago. So looking at reduce, first thing is just looking at the packaging that we make. Can we make it lighter? Can we make it with less waste? That's the very first thing. Can we use less energy? Can we buy more energy efficient machinery? Yes, it might be more expensive, but if over the course of a 5-year period that it saves us enough on our electricity that we can actually go and put those machines in, yeah, let's do it. Let's actually try and reduce our carbon footprint. We're putting in installation of solar panels. We're now going through this process of doing that for ourselves at the moment, and all other energy we buy comes from sustainable sources as well. When we look at reuse, closed loop water systems ensure that we're not wasting any water. Multi-use reclaimed pallets, recycled boxes, all these kinds of things go into the way that we actually put our products across. Inline waste capturing, so that we can take our waste from manufacturing, reprocess it, repurpose it, and put it straight back into manufacturing with no loss. And then recycle. Where those things aren't possible, to adopt a zero to landfill commitment, which we have successfully adopted, that means that none of our manufacturing waste goes to landfill. Anything we cannot repurpose goes out for recycling. Next stage is to work with our suppliers, looking at our supply chain to try and bring on more sustainable opportunities. This includes things like bio-based plastics, which come with some challenges we probably haven't got time to go into today, and there's an awful lot of confusion around, but we do work with these, predominantly looking at sugarcane-based materials coming from natural resources that replicate existing plastics so that we can then not damage the recycling chain, they continue to be recycled and reused within existing infrastructure. And then last year, we partnered with the Prevented Ocean Plastics Programme, meaning that we moved all of our recycled choices for PET, kind of things you're drinking in water bottles, all of those to a Prevented Ocean source. So this is, Prevented Ocean is plastics collected from coastal areas at risk of ocean pollution, comes from developing countries that don't have waste management infrastructure, and rather than using European curbside material, which there is actually not enough of, and there's a huge demand for, we're going to these countries where we're actually able to go and source this, help improve their environmental conditions, and these are the kinds of things that other businesses will be charging for, and we are incorporating just as a part of our standard ways of working. Has other benefits as well, socioeconomic benefits, working with these developing countries, bringing in employment, regular income, safe working environments. So there's a lot of great other benefits that come alongside that. And this year we're aiming to bring in our other recyclers into line with that as well, so our HDP and PP. Since we launched this program in September last year, we brought in 161 tonnes of recycling from these communities, recovering 6.4 million bottles, okay, that otherwise would have stayed out in the environment.
Sorry, I just interjected. That clean-up from clean-up waste.
Yeah. So this is from areas that would be out in the environment. These bottles would have just been left lying in the environment, at risk of entering the ocean, and 6.4 million so far since September. And then moving on to working with our customers, and this is about trying to provide them with solutions. So that prevented ocean solution, all of our customers get it, whether they want it or whether they don't want it. We don't give them the choice, but it is providing sustainable options, whether that's lightweight packaging or refillable packaging, those kinds of things, and taking the onus away from them. You know, I said that a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's really important actually. So often these things are left to the brands and left to the consumers, but as a manufacturer, it's our responsibility to make some of these changes. So in 2018, we rolled out our PCR 10 initiative, which is where we made the decision that anyone working with Spectra would have 10% recycled material no matter what, taking away some of that requirement for them to make a choice. That was always planned to grow to around 25%, but with the introduction of the plastics packaging tax, we moved to a PCR 30 initiative, which actually puts 35% recycled material in. And we have plans to develop that further. And customers that wish to take it a step further already can put in 50 or 100% should they choose. Then we're looking at ways to develop other solutions. So we're talking here, this is a refill product with a refill pouch, and that opportunity to continue to reuse their packaging for as long as possible. And then engagement with the public and education. And this is a massive thing. So the life cycle analysis I touched on briefly, and I know we haven't got much time, so I will try and do this as quickly as possible. But life cycle analysis is looking at not just waste management, but the whole picture, the whole environmental impact of our packaging. So from looking at it from raw material supply, packaging manufacturing of our products, distribution, storage, consumer use, and end of life, and looking at how this genuinely impacts the environment. And we conducted a study independently. We brought in an outside contractor to look at this, taking the same product packaged in 2 different types of plastic, glass and aluminium. And this here shows the environmental impact based on greenhouse gas emissions, non-renewable energy, fresh water, land usage, and the impact on the ecosphere. And what you can actually see is using the right product for the right thing is the most important thing. We can acknowledge that there are significant concerns at the moment around waste management, but when you start looking at glass and aluminium, for example, when we're looking at the drinks industry, where we're seeing quite a big move to people going into glass or aluminium, the environmental impact of putting single-use products into that is huge. And so making the right choice is really important, and making an informed choice. To do this as well, we're trying to work with schools, and our marketing team are putting a huge amount of work into going into schools and talking to children of all ages, working to kind of communicate opportunities within the industry and how they can have a genuine impact as we put here, the future thought leaders of the world, as well as trying to engage with mainstream media, with radio, and we've just recently done some work with Sky TV. So, finally, just in conclusion, continued engagement at all levels, suppliers, customers, consumers where we can, and the future generations, to continue to expand our prevented ocean plastics commitment. We're making rapid strides to move our whole business to net zero. In fact, we've just gone through our latest carbon assessment, and we're currently sitting around 47 tonnes a year, annual carbon. And rapid strides to move our business to that, to try and get down to that point, and then continue to develop environmental solutions that have the minimal impact we possibly can. That's me.